Guys, welcome back to Mango Invest. In this video, we're going to weigh up the options, between Visa and Mastercard. Which company is going to be a better dividend paying company for you in terms of growth and consistency. We'll bring up the balance sheets, seeking alpha just to see their dividend growth and their dividend history, and we'll quickly figure out and decide, if you want to buy Visa or Mastercard in terms of your investment. So let's look at the financials first, and we'll do a bit of analysis, and we'll compare the two. So the first thing when we're looking in the financials, we're looking at the income statement. So let's do Mastercard first. Straight away looking at the revenue. All right, let's see if they're tracking a nice linear progression, and it looks like they're looking pretty good in 2020. It looks like there was a little bit of a hiccup, but that's understandable there. And then they've picked it up again in 2021 and 2022, increasing their revenue year on year. Let's look at the graph here, and then as you can see, it looks like a nice linear progression there. So there's no alarm bells ringing there so far. Now let's scroll down to the EBITDA. Again, another good indication that the company is tracking well financially. So as you can see here, right, looks like it's pretty good. Again, in 2020 there was that slight hiccup, but then they've picked it up in the most recent 2 years there. But here's the graph there to show you the nice linear progression there. Cool. So that's pretty much all I look for on the income statement. All right, let's compare that to Visa. All right, so this is Visa now. Now, as you can see with the revenue, in 2020, they still had that slight decline in the revenue, so they're pretty much on the same page there. The only difference so far in terms of the revenue, Visa obviously earn a lot more. So these guys are earning in the early 20 billions, whereas if we go back to Mastercard, they're sort of just under the, in the mid-range, like 18 billion, 15 billion, etc. So moving back to Visa, okay, slightly higher revenue, and let's look at the graph there. So a nice linear progression there is what we want to see. Now let's look at the EBITDA. Same with 2020. It seems, the EBITDA had a slight hiccup as well, but the next following 2 years, they've continued that progression. So looking at the graph, that looks nice and good there. And again, the difference between the EBITDA seems to be a little bit more than Mastercard, as you can see there. All right, so in terms of the income statement, I think that Visa takes the win there. But moving back over to Mastercard, we'll look at the balance sheet. All right, now we're just going to have a look at how much cash is on hand in regards to the two different companies. Now, it looks like with the cash on hand, 2020 had slightly more cash, being 11 billion, but every other year is sitting around the $8 billion mark. All right, now let's look at Visa. All right, looking on the balance sheet again, so this is a lot more cash on hand than what Mastercard had. With Mastercard, we're looking in the 8 billions as a general rule of thumb for every year. Now we've got a couple of 19 billions, a 20 billion in the previous years, 13 billion, so a lot higher than Mastercard there. Okay, so in terms of the balance sheet, in terms of cash, again, Visa takes the win here. All right, moving back to Mastercard, we'll look at the cash flow statement in terms of the dividend. All right, so looking down at the common stock dividends paid. All right, looks to me like a nice linear progression there. All right, which tells me that they're paying their dividend consistently, but they're also growing that dividend. All right, so let's looking at the numbers now. So the last dividend payment was 1 billion, or just under 2 billion. Now let's look at Visa. Okay, so they're essentially paying out double the amount of dividends there. So this was 3.2 billion. The previous year in 21 was 2.7 billion, etc. So again, in terms of the amount of dividends that these guys are paying, and the consistency, I think Visa wins this one again. All right, let's look at seeking alpha. So first off, let's look at Mastercard, and we can start to determine, their dividend growth and their consistency. So straight away, looking at Mastercard, you've got a consecutive payment of dividends for 15 years consecutively. 11 of the most recent years, they've grown that dividend. And here you can see that nice linear progression with Mastercard. All right. All right, so let's look at Visa in terms of the progression. So now they've actually paid dividends for 14 years, although they've increased it, or they've grown their dividend consecutively for 14 years straight. So as opposed to 11, so Mastercard had grown theirs for 11 years. Visa has now grown theirs for 14 years, okay? And then you can see that nice linear progression from Mastercard there, although it looks like they've been increasing it a little bit more. All right, so let's go back to Mastercard and let's see how much they've actually been growing their dividend. Scrolling down here. All right, so starting from 2012, that's when they've started their consistent growth of dividends. We've got, for the first couple of years, 75%, 100%, and 109%. And then from there, they've kept it quite consistent at a low of 10% in the last, say 7 years, which is extremely good. That's a very comfortable sort of growth rate for a company there. But I just want to focus your attention to Visa, right, in terms of the growth, right, because it's slightly more by the looks of it. So, from 2009 all the way up to 2022, so for 14 years, they've been increasing their dividend. But just look at the numbers here. Now, they've had a couple of big early ones in 2009 being 100% of growth, but every single year it seems a little bit more consistent. And we've got a low of 9.4%. And as recent, we've got a high of 27%. But in the last year of 2022, they've raised their dividend by almost 18%. That is insane. That is large numbers for to grow your dividend. But so I think overall, just in terms of all the financials and looking at the dividend through Seeking Alpha, I think it's safe to say that, if you were to choose between Mastercard and Visa seems to be the more, I suppose, like consistent with a high growth rate of their dividends. That's the company that I'd be choosing. But if you have a different opinion, let me know in the comments. I'd really like to know your thoughts on that one. All right, but let's move to Stake. All right, and let's see how the company's tracking in the last 3 years. So as you can see, Mastercard has a dividend yield of 6.3%. Again, Visa has a slightly higher dividend yield by being 0.79%. So that's another big win for Visa. But as you can see here, it looks to me like it's fairly like a volatile sort of company. I think, the companies in the financial sector are generally always going to be that way. But let's look over to Visa. And in the 3-year period, okay, so it's currently trading for cheaper. It's got a higher dividend yield, but as you can see, it still maintains that very volatile state. And I think that's just the nature of these type of companies. But yeah, that's all I wanted to talk about today, guys. Just a quick analysis into if you wanted to either choose, Mastercard or Visa. These are some raw facts for you guys to take away now, and you can make an assessment yourselves, and you can choose between the two different companies when you're looking for another dividend payer. All right, thanks for your time, guys. Make sure you subscribe and hit the thumbs up button. It really helps out the channel, and I'll catch you next time.